longer, and I'll introduce you and we can get started. Oh, here we go. Morning. Okay, actually, we're all here. All right. This is record time. Just 10 minutes after the hour. All right. So last couple lectures of the course, we're moving into a new sector, and that's the biotech sector. I don't even know what we call it anymore. My daughter refers to it as med tech, and I kind of like that because that's sort of broad, right? That's sort of broad and yet focused as well because it is medicine. And we have two cases. The first one is a book that I hope you all read because it's a very interesting story. It is a touch entrepreneurial, and I think there's plenty of stuff in there that's kind of going to be an interesting conversation to have. Mm-hmm. And to help us with that, I have a very good friend of mine, Scott Giambalvo, who's come in and will talk to us first about being a product manager and being a business person in the medical space, and then fascinating stories. And you should interrupt and ask questions and really delve deep into that. And then we'll take a short break and we'll talk about the book. Okay, Scott, you want to?
Sure. And you can, some of my background, my experience, and some of the stories, hopefully I don't pontificate too much, have some direct correlations to what went on in the book. So my background is all in med tech, mainly medical devices. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a spin from that perspective, but there are some correlations to the pharmaceutical industry, as well as the pharmacy industry, but that we won't get into that part. All right, whoops.
Oh, sorry, just close that window. This is your PDF.
Gotcha.
I think. Yeah, it is.
So it's not a, I should have played with this first. Let's do it that way. No?
There's the keyboard's down below and you could probably hit page down.
I think the browser isn't connected.
Is it frozen? There we go.
Yeah, I didn't want to do it that way.
You can also expand to full screen.
Yeah, I know that's what I was trying to do. Hold on.
I have your PDF, I have your PowerPoint of it.
You have the PowerPoint open?
It's not open, but I could do that in a second. It's what you did a couple years ago.
Can you put it on full screen?
I think it's that double arrow.
Let me try
Yeah, the arrow
Right.
right on the upper right corner.
Right behind, right beside the gear icon on the top right.
That would be
Yeah, but there's a
for
different view.
PDF.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the gear icon on the top right.
Come on up and I don't know how to do that on that.
No, the one next to it.
The like arrow one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Does that work?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, perfect. All right, a little background on me. I've been running a company for the last 16 years. I was very original in the name and named it Scott Allen Enterprises. Allen's my middle name. So I really went out there with the name to kind of position it. I work with, right now about 7 med device, health IT type companies, mostly setting up sales and marketing teams for them and managing those teams. Also get involved on the acquisition, buy and sell front. So I work with some PE companies as well. I'm doing a lot of due diligence work, particularly right now, selling one company and buying another for 2 different groups. No overlap, which is kind of critical. Worked for, so many different companies over the years. It's kind of dizzying with my client base. So everything from, heart disease diagnostics to patient lifting equipment to health IT platforms, artificial grafts for tendon and ligament repairs. So instead of using human grafts, we use artificial ones. On the imaging side, did a fair amount of work there as well with companies that leased CT, MR, PET CT equipment. So you gain a lot of knowledge about a lot of different things, including a number of different companies that worked in the brain health sector. So very broad spectrum of knowledge, and there's a lot of really insanely stupid things in this head. So you can bring them out today. My daughter's here with me as well. She'll kind of vouch for the stupid things that come out of my head on a regular basis. So.
And one of those up there is an SMU spinout.
It is. Biolume is an SMU spinout, and Biolume is developing a, I'll just call it an asthma event detection device. And they're making a little bit of revenue right now. They're in talks with some big companies right now as well. They haven't commercialized the device they set out to commercialize just yet, and it's been 6 or 7 years. And by the way, that's a little bit of a recurring theme even in this book you just read. Duncan and I were talking about this right before, but this kind of notion of this get rich overnight scenario. The book, they don't really talk about the timelines in a big way, but these were not 1 or 2 year events. These were get rich over 5, 6, 7, 10 years. And it was not 40 hours a week during that time period. It was more like 70, 80 hours a week and live the life, not knowing if there's going to be a payday at the back end. So these guys at Biolume are living that dream right now, and they're living hand to mouth, but they've been surviving for about 7+ years, and they keep growing stronger.
Yeah, and I would not have guessed when I started working with them and talking to them, I would not have guessed that they'd be around this much later.
Yeah, and they're doing okay.
Yeah.
They haven't made, I know, right?
Don't give up. That's the biggest
No,
thing.
I mean, they keep getting stronger, and the IP keeps getting stronger, and they get more grant money in and more companies interested in them, and it just works that way. This is an interesting product. Never get off the ground, and we're going to talk about that. And this product is actually a filtration device. And it filters the blood, which is not unique in itself, but the type of filtration, it's actually filtering out cytokines. Very specific to this case in particular. So the purpose for this filtration system was to eliminate the effects of sepsis. Does anybody know what sepsis is? All right. So sepsis, in particular COVID, and some of the cancers that we've been talking about, or that we will talk about in this book, sepsis happens very quickly, and it can happen from anything from the flu to COVID to strep. And what ends up happening is your immune system goes into a very hyped up response. So your body starts killing itself because it's the last ditch effort. Your body thinks there's a massive attack underway, and it releases a cytokine storm, this massive immunosystem response. And it starts killing everything, including your organs. So it goes kidneys first, and lungs, and heart, and you're dead. And it's not stopped within a 24 to 48 hour period, it's irreversible. Like you're gone very quickly. So the pattern that happens in hospitals is it looks like the patient's getting better. They went into this souped up, hyped up response. And for about 4 to 6 hours, it looks like they're getting very healthy when in fact they're actually going the exact opposite way. And you talk about the cytokines, which is essentially the basis of the beta blockers that we talk about in these books. They're turning on or off a cytokine, or a specific cytokine response. tyrosine in particular. So you've got this scenario where these guys are trying to shut down the entire response by filtering out these cytokines from the bloodstream in mass, basically slowing down or moderating the immune system response. Sounds pretty cool, right? Works great. You unfortunately also take out albumin out of the system, which, any diabetics in the room? Hopefully not. But in the original dialysis and that was used for kidney failure, you're also taking out a substance called albumin. And the original purpose of dialysis was to filter your blood from kidney failure, from basically uric acid, et cetera. But you're also taking out albumin. The problem with albumin is if you take it out, albumin is used in the digestive process and for the reabsorption of nutrition into the bloodstream. And if you take it out, no matter how much you eat, you will slowly die of malnutrition. So you have to put it back in at the same time. This product needed extensive testing and trialing, and they can never raise enough money to actually get the trials going. Anybody have rough clue on how much a drug trial, did you go through this all with them?
No, this is our first venture in there, but they might remember a number from the book.
$5 billion, right?
Well, talk about per patient for a second.
Okay.
But it's $1 billion about right for from all 3 phases of a clinical trial. So typically you'll do a phase 1, it'll be anywhere from 10 to 30 patients just to kind of make sure you're in the right ballpark. Typically you'll run anywhere from $10,000 a patient up to about $40,000 or $50,000 a patient for that first phase per patient. Okay, so you do the math here. Let's just say it's $30,000 a patient. So you only need about $300,000 to $500,000 for that first phase 1. Phase 2, you're typically talking about efficacy and maybe dosage, and you'll want somewhere between 100 and 300 patients for those. Your costs are going to come down a little bit, but you're still going to be. You're not going to be probably at that high range anymore at $50,000 a patient, but you're probably going to be more in that $20,000 to $30,000 range, more as a norm. So you start doing the math here, and the numbers get really big. And for phase 3, you're looking at hundreds of patients, typically at multiple sites around the country. And now you're talking, gosh, this is where it gets into the $30, $50, $100 million range real fast. So when you're doing people, it gets real expensive, and then you're hoping there's no setbacks along the way. Just start you all over again. These guys needed somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 to $40 million to get off the ground. Never found the funding for it, and it's actually still alive, but in a different capacity. It is used for extending brain-dead organ donors. So brain-dead organ donors also go into sepsis over time. The body essentially starts shutting down and killing itself before you can harvest all the organs. And that device is now used to extend the life of brain-dead organ donors. So it did find a use. And if you ever need an organ transplant, you might be able to thank these folks for actually sticking it out. One of the other products we'll talk about on the product dev side here real quick is this rugged ambulance stretcher. And I'm going to tell this story right now. So I'm going to take you back to 1994. It's the hot tub time machine. Okay. And we're going back to 94. Anybody know who these folks are? Yeah. All right, so I'll start with Uma Thurman. Okay. And this was before the Fall Out Boys started singing about her.
She's in the new sort of documentary on Uber that's on Netflix now.
Yeah, so the folks that sang about her were only about 14 years old when this movie came out. So Uma and John Travolta and the Quentin Tarantino masterpiece, Pulp Fiction, came out at that time. All right, the rest of these folks, anybody have any clue who these folks are? Greatest American cyclist of all time that didn't use steroids to enhance his performance. Anybody know who this is?
Armstrong, right?
Greg LeMond. So Armstrong was a big steroid user. Go back 20 years before that. So Greg LeMond was the original American Tour de France winner, and he retired in 1994.
Nelson Mandela.
Right. He was elected president of South Africa in 1994.
Tonya Harding.
Yes. You know who Tonya Harding is? You don't watch the movie. You didn't watch the movie?
I don't.
Ah, golly. So Tonya Harding had her boyfriend take a bat,
I thought it was a tire
a tire iron to
iron.
her,
Sad that I know that.
to Nancy Kerrigan, her key US competitor in the Olympics, and had her boyfriend actually smash Nancy Kerrigan in the knees before the Olympics.
Are you serious?
Yeah, totally serious. And they got caught.
I mean, they could have been more nonchalant.
So, there's actually a movie of I Harding, I think, or I Tanya. That's quite hysterical. And then, of course, one of my boyhood heroes, OJ, was actually in the white Bronco car chase back in 1984. So I'm giving you a little time period. This is the time period that I started looking at ambulance stretchers. At the time, there was essentially one major competitor. It's a company called Fernald Washington, which is their product. And I worked for a company called Stryker at the time, which was a mid-sized medical device company. We were about 100, well, at that time, we maybe 320 million in revenue. And we made hospital stretchers, we made some hip and knee implants, we made some surgical instruments, and I worked for the hospital bed and stretcher division. And they said, come up with something new. I said, okay. They said, come up with something that we could grow into a different division. I said, okay. And I went on and started doing some research. I'm looking at this product, and I'm like, we could do better than this. It's this raw aluminum product. Very thin, very flimsy. We did a lot of ride-alongs, EMTs. Some crazy stories there. Those guys are absolute berserk. We started asking questions. Now, the product, the sheets would get caught in the mechanism periodically, and the unit would just drop the patient on it. Anybody do any paramedic or EMT work? No. So this is pretty lightweight, but it had a lot of issues. So to keep the sheets from getting caught in the mechanism, they would put cardboard underneath the mattress. Think about that from a blood-borne cleaning standpoint. They'd have stripes across their bellies. And that was because they had raw aluminum leaning up against their stomachs, and they would use that to try to raise the stretchers up to the high height. Because you're going down from the ground level, and then you basically lifting this thing up with a 2-minute operation. They had pinch points all over the place on this thing. And I'd ask them about it, and like, oh yeah, why do you have blood blisters all over your hands? Like, oh, I get caught in the side rails, I get caught them in the lift mechanisms. I'm like, well, do you want these fixed? And like, no. It's like, we're tough guys. This is kind of what makes an EMT an EMT. We're cowboys, we do this kind of stuff. They own 90% share. Like, I think we could do better than this. And at the time, I'm taking it back again a little bit. Mountain bikes were just coming into the market, so they were just starting to use the fat, oversized aluminum tubing in some different shapes to get a lot of extra strength out of materials. I know we got at least one engineer in the room. And is everybody engineering in this room?
Yeah.
All right. So they were going with very thin wall aluminum tubing on the mountain bikes, and now they've gone into crazy extruded shapes as well. But by going with a larger diameter and thinner wall, you get some really cool strength to weight ratios. And we applied it to an ambulance stretcher. We changed the mechanism. We added a glitter top that actually didn't need cardboard for the sheets not to get caught in it. Eliminated all the pinch points, and we launched. And it took about 1.5 years to launch. Now, during this process, we were shot down by the company 2 separate times. They said no.
By Stryker.
By Stryker. My president said, nope, not doing it, putting our money elsewhere. Third time, I'm gonna start it on my own. So myself, another fellow by the name of Gary Morton, VP, and an engineer, Chris Way. The 3 of us are basically ready to leave. We packed our boxes. We are out the door. There's nothing left on my desk. And we don't have any funding. One of the guys is thinking about putting up his house. Mom and I are also looking at putting up our house and putting up money into this new company we're about to start. And the attorney that we're working with says, give your company one last chance to do this because you don't want any lawsuits and you want to be free and clear and you want to be upfront with them. You don't want to put your houses up before this becomes an issue. So we go right to the CEO this time and we say, John, got this idea, it's turned down twice. We're going to do this on our own. We just want to make sure this is all kosher with you. He said, who shot you down? I'm like, oh. Your president shot us down twice. He goes, why would he shoot you down? I'm like, now at this point we're in this oh crap mode, because we're already gone. So about an hour later, we have all our funding. We're not moving, we're not leaving the company, and we basically have the funding to move forward with this product. So first question for you, was this a smart decision or a stupid decision?
I mean, they already shut you down twice. Maybe you should have talked to the CEO beforehand, but.
Yeah, probably. I might have gotten fired for doing that, by the way.
Really?
Going around your boss.
I mean, you're going to your boss's boss. So.
You went around your boss. If you were boss, that's what we went around
I said,
to.
what would you do? And in my case, I'm at this point, let me put this in perspective, I'm probably 26 years old. My president is, 45, 50, I don't know how old he was at the time. Yeah, like so would you still go around? I mean, if you did, and I could have, and I actually knew the it was still a relatively small enough company that we had meetings with the CEO on a monthly basis. So he knew who I was. It wasn't but there's at least 3 layers between me and him. And even the highest ranking guy on our team, there were still 2+ layers between him and the CEO. So this is a major departure if we went around.
So I'm gonna pull this thread if you don't mind, Scott. First of all, Aaron, you're, Navy, chain of command, right? I mean, that's a pretty, and so when I was product manager, one of the places I was product manager at, we hired someone who had been an Army captain out of West Point, and she was running operations. And I was, as a product manager, I was pretty aggressive, and I think it's important to be pretty aggressive. And so there was a time when a decision had to be made, a shipping a product, shipping a sample out that day. She was not around, and so I made that call, right? I went basically around her and went in there. And we got it done, it was absolutely the right thing to do, but there were a few bruises, you know, and it was probably not, I was not sensitive enough to how she perceived that as a former Army officer. And so it definitely damaged the relationship that was an important one, right? So, you know, you gotta, as a product manager, you have to be audacious, you have to go around and do these things, but you also should be understanding what the ramifications are.
And I'm gonna put it bluntly, I was an ass. I was a 26-year-old ass, okay? I was running roughshod with a product I loved. We got approved. Now we're a Skunk Works division of Stryker. How do you think my president felt about me at this point in time?
Not great.
Oh yeah, we were besties after that, like it's on. I believe the CEO said something to the president at the time in the meeting, he's like, Harry, when somebody brings a good idea like this to the table, you don't need to kill it, you need to be out in front of it, championing it. This was said publicly. So pretty much after that meeting, my career with Harry was pretty much over.
But what kind of company was Stryker back then?
It was a smaller company. I mean, at the time, it was very entrepreneurial. It was, you know, we had grown. Now, I wasn't there for this part of the growth, but essentially it was a family-run company for the first 35 or 40 years into the 70s. It had grown from like $500,000 to maybe 20, 25 million. Late 70s, early 80s, they bring on John Brown as a CEO and they say, we're going to change this from a family-run company into this still entrepreneurial, but we're going to grow it now. And I came in, we were about $180 million in revenue, just about 10 years after that, after he started. And we were on this growth cycle of 20% growth a year. And that was the mandate. And to do that, you really have to think outside the box. Either your market has to be growing wildly, which was growing pretty good, but not that crazy good. Or you had to constantly be thinking of how to do things more or better or steal share from your competitors in really aggressive ways. So we made for a very aggressive product managers, marketing managers, sales reps, sales managers across the board, engineers. And we were paid very well for our efforts as well. So Scott, go develop a new division for us. All right, and we do. Now I asked the question, was I right to stay with the company or should I have left?
Well, staying is definitely the less risky option, but staying also, if it's any possible profits you would have had as your own company with the guys that you want to start with. So.
I mean, this is the classic entrepreneurial dilemma.
Well, there are a couple of questions here. Did you have the technology? Did you have this, how far along was this developed?
We had the designs developed. The IP was questionable because it could have been ours, it could have been theirs.
Well, that's why you went to talk to the president, the CEO. So there's no technical risk, right? That's pretty much it. Like, was there a market risk? Had the market seen this?
Market had not seen this yet, so we didn't know what the market reaction was. Oh, and the other thing is, we didn't have any financing yet. Okay? I mean, it was all coming, this is all internal financing. So this is still high risk.
How about manufacturing?
We had it sourced. We had enough between Chris and Gary, we had enough that we knew where to actually get it done. And we had a lab tech with a lot of equipment, so we could have gotten prototyping and probably some pilot runs done on our own. We would have had to outsource for production though. We had it sourced already, but clearly our cost structure would have been higher that way.
And then for distribution?
Distribution, we were gonna go with direct sales reps.
Yeah.
And we're gonna do that either way. It would have been a challenge. What's a sales rep cost? I'll tell you what it costs now. But it would have cost probably 120,000 a year all in at the time. Now it's probably more like 2.25. And I'm talking about T&E and you know, travel, et cetera. So it's not cheap.
And
How many need to blanket the country? Like, general rule is one for every NFL city, 32 reps to cover the country. All right, so keep going.
what was the potential market size?
For this one product, it's probably about 100 mil. Now, there was a breadth of product on top of this, stair chairs, stretchers, basket stretchers, potentially down the road defibrillators, et cetera. So you can really grow that market. We figured total EMS market was somewhere just shy of $1 billion at the time, I think $700 or $800 million. And there's only one company in the patient handling sector and only 3 or 4 companies in the defibrillation sector. And we were already looking at the acquisition of one of those companies, Physio Control, which Eli Lilly was actually trying to get rid of at the time for what turned out to be pennies on the dollar. I'll get to that story in a bit.
When you say we were looking to acquire it, was that Stryker or was that you?
It was the 3 of us. Yeah, I got in a lot of trouble for that too. Because after we got approval for this, I had already started the conversations with Eli Lilly. And Physio Control was the big defibrillator company at the time. They were shut down by the FDA. There were some quality issues. They weren't following some of the quality standards that the FDA had just recently changed. And so you all have to follow quality standards now. And when I say quality standards, these are not, this is like ISO standards. So you're familiar with ISO? So FDA GMP has its own set of standards very akin to that. So this is more paperwork than actually the quality of the product was bad. The quality was very good. But they get shut down. So Eli Lilly's trying to sell this medical device coming off because they're a pharmaceutical company and they know nothing about medical devices. And when you start talking about pharma companies which have margins of, anybody know? Yeah, it's right. When you say 100%, it pretty much is. They're typically north of 80%. 85% is not unusual, which is why they always get into trouble. They're like, oh, you're making all this money. You're basically creating a pill for pennies and you're selling it for dollars. But nobody counts all the $1 billion in research they put in or all the fails they had. So it looks like, but their margins are enormous. But the margins on medical devices are typically in the 55 to 65% range, much lower than the 85% in the pharmaceutical side. So Eli Lilly is trying to pawn this off, and I call him up because again, I'm this 26-year-old ass. I'm like, are you interested in selling? Like, actually, we are. Talk to Goldman Sachs. We got this. So I'm well down the line in this acquisition process, and I never told my president or my CEO. Anyway, we got approved for this, and about 3 months later, we're all getting called back into the CEO's office, like, because the Eli Lilly CFO happened to be golfing buddies with our CEO. And that's the way we found out we were looking at buying Physio. We failed at that acquisition. Stryker ended up buying it 15 years later for $1.6 billion. We put a stink pin at about 35 million. We could have had it for 50 million. Missed out. By the way, Stryker still did very well with the $1.6 billion acquisition they did on Physio. All right, so we launched. First year revenues, about 1.4 million. That was half a year, but we're already making, like, we know it's going to be successful at this point. Second year, we did about 3.8. Third year, we did just under 10. The division has grown wildly since we started in essentially 96 when we launched. It is now 2022, I don't have 23 numbers yet, $1.4 billion revenue division for Stryker. Okay. Should I have stayed? Now you know more information. Should I have gone out and done this on my own or done it within Stryker? And it's a really hard decision because we didn't have the money. Even now, I'm like,
I think you made the right call, because you said you didn't have investors at the time. So there was no other people involved, and there was also the looming risk of the IP lawsuit.
assuming assuming they would have freed us up to do the IP.
Then you are counting like, kind of like the profit, the profit opportunity between one or the other. But I think the fact that that risk existed would be the thing that would stop me.
I also think that like having that lack of funding would be problematic just because like there's a good chance that you might not even be able to get something delivered. So you're chancing like the whole like a possibility on like the fact that like there might not be enough funding for it. And that's like you said about the filter, right? Like I mean they didn't have funding, so like it didn't have like other than like what it was intended.
By the way, this question keeps me up at nights. I look, the decision we ultimately made was this is high risk. We didn't have the funding. If even had we had some funding, I'm pretty sure it would not have been a $1.4 billion division 30 years later. Because there's a certain amount of backing you get from a large company behind you, right? I didn't have those resources. Gary didn't have those resources. Chris didn't have those resources. We would have been okay, probably. We would have grown it into a decent sized company. We might have been gobbled up by our main competitor along the way and bought out very quickly. Very, very doubtful it would be the size. Particularly because at some point, if somebody offered us $4 or $5 million a piece for it, we would have been out anyway, thinking we had killed it. But goddamn what ifs, man. I could have bought a building here. We'd all be we'd be in the Scott Giambalvo room 205 building right now. What's this, Jerry Junkin? The hell with Jerry. And that's the kind of, the case we talk about in the next hour is really going to be a lot about taking some of those risks. It's as expensive it is to get this mechanical device to the market. It's $1 billion to get a new truck to the market right now.
Were you selling into hospitals or were you selling into separate EMT?
So mainly, the ambulance service market at the time was still fragmented. It was mainly mom and pops. And about 60% of the market was these mom and pop ambulance services, which by the way, wasn't a real mature industry at the time. You go back 20 years prior to that and ambulance services were the same as funeral services. So if you see some of those old hearses, like the real old hearses, they're like giant station wagons where you put bodies in the back. So the funeral service and the ambulance service were one and the same. And it matured in the late 60s, early 70s, and 80s where they started doing some, instead of just pick up and get you to the hospital, they actually started doing some things. So 60% were these mom and pops, about 25% was fire departments that also had ambulance services. And the rest were hospital-based services or military or kind of others. And that was the market at the time. There's since been roll-ups. There's some really big companies that own ambulance services now. Gosh, what was that movie? just recently about the funeral service industry, the guy that just got, that sued Lowen for big dollars. Anyway, there were some roll-ups in the ambulance service industry. American Medical Response is one of the big players. Lowen was another player that got bought up as well. That owned a big chunk of the US market, but at the time it was all mom and pops. And it wasn't in the hospital for the most part. So,
Because there's real barriers to selling into a hospital.
oh yeah.
And Stryker would open those doors.
Oh, yeah.
And the startup might
Oh,
not be
yeah.
able to.
Stryker gave us instant credibility in a lot of different ways. You know, quality of the product, make hospital stretchers, make ambulance stretchers, duh, we know they're good. We had instant access to reps. So we don't want our own reps, or we don't want the other reps, we want to have a standalone. And they gave us 7 reps to start.
They probably already have a foot in the door.
Yeah, they did. They already had a lot of relationships in a lot of these places. So there's a lot of benefit doing it internally versus doing it on your own.
Yeah.
Needless to say, this building could have been named after me right now. We could have had it on my yacht out in the Dallas Harbor that I built for myself.
The other piece of it is, there was no real market time pressure. Right? You didn't have to, in the telecom space, I've seen founders sell out because they only had a window of a few years.
Right.
And they had to scale fast and hit that window, right? In this case, the MPs were happy. You know, they were wrong, but they were happy.
Yeah.
And so there was
The only thing I
no,
loved it.
you didn't need to get big fast on this, which also changes the financing, equation.
Anyway, I went the safe route. I'm not sure I would have gone the safe route, but I know Gary was. And Chris would have gone either way, but ultimately Gary was the guy who swayed the vote, and we stayed in. And look, they threw some stock options at us, so it wasn't like we got out without anything out of this deal. But clearly not the billionaire status that I could have been had I stayed for 30 years. But,
Tell the branding story. Talk about a product management decision.
yeah, so we went color. And one of the big branding decisions on this product was, remember, this is the product before, right? So there's no color, there's no nothing. And the reason we powder coated the unit in the first place was because I talked about raw aluminum oxidizes. And it makes your hands black, it makes your white ambulance shirt black. It's hard to clean. As soon as you clean it, it starts oxidizing all over you. So we said, we're gonna powder coat it for that reason alone. We're also gonna make it something that's highly visible. Safety, right? Side of the road, put some aluminum reflectors on it. Originally it was gonna be lime green. And we powder coated the unit, we put a pearl undercoating on it, with this lime green reflective coating on top. And my lab tech takes it outside into the parking lot, Kalamazoo, Michigan, in the middle of winter, into the parking lot, into the snow. He's looking at it, he can't look at it. And he's like trying to visualize dust. You can't look at this damn thing in the snow in the parking lot. So one by one, we're all coming down, and this Gentile's like, hey, we can't look at this unit on the parking lot, it's too bright. I'm like, what are you talking about? One by one, we're all going down to the parking lot to look at this thing, and we're like, oh my God. You can't look at it, it actually hurts your eyes. There's so much sun reflecting off this in the snow, it's actually like blinding. This is 1 week before launch, and we have orders already. Yeah. So we're like, all right, well, what are we gonna do? we got all this lime green paint on order, we got this pearl undercoating on order, and we're screwed. That powder coat was available.
The yellow one?
Yeah. So we're like, school bus yellow, right? It's kind of safety, it's kind of emergency, da, da, da. We tried red, it looked ugly as crap. And we're making the decision. So we go Tonka yellow, we're like Tonka tough. And that was the launch. We got beat up so bad in the market the first year for chicken shit yellow, cowboy yellow. All the cowboy fans hated it in Dallas. We're like, we're not buying that unless you paint it silver and blue. Now I'm a Giants fan, so I don't give a crap about Cowboys, but I'm like, we never sell in Dallas, I'm okay. We launch in yellow and black. And mind you, my president is still there, and he's like, that's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. You need to make it lots of colors, you need to get rid of this color. Anyway, he gets fired in the meantime, his VP takes over, and I've got now an ally there. But even my ally is like, that's an ugly color. What are you doing? And I made this big, Tonka tough marketing branding pitch on how this was gonna be the brand and color was gonna be a big part of our strategy. And a year in, Dallas comes back to us and says, we'll order 100 pots, but you gotta do it in blue and silver. And I'm wavering. That's a $350,000 order. I'm like, should I do it? Should I not do it? My president, new president, gets wind. And he comes into my office and comes into my office. He sits down and he's like, I hear you're thinking about doing this in gold and silver. I'm like, yeah, it's a 300,000 plus order, plus. Like, and he's like, I don't think you should do it. Because you're right. Because color is everything. This brand is really kind of taking root. It's rugged, that was the name of the product. It's immediately identifiable. He goes, I'll back you. If you want to do blue and silver, I will back you and you can do this. But I strongly recommend you don't. Looks a $300,000 deal. Now mind you, we were only about $3 million, that 3 point, whatever it was that year. I didn't think your first year actually, but he convinced me to stay with the color.
There's a personal cost to that, though, right?
Yeah, I lost bonus money.
And what were your sales force telling you to do?
Oh, Salesforce was like, Gary Montana was like, we gotta do this in blue. Like, that's serious bonus money for him too. They got straight commission on this stuff, probably 10-11% commission, so 35 grand out of his pocket, probably 15 to 20 out of mine on bonus. This is tough, like, tough call. Made that call. It's still yellow and black, dominates the industry.
Well, but if you had taken that, like, sure, you would have made some money, but I think that would have set the precedent for everybody to ask for different colors in every city,
Absolutely.
and that would have been a branding fiasco.
Absolutely, absolutely. We had this color, it was thematic, it was instantly recognizable, we were what we were. But mind you, you go back a year and nobody knew what yellow and black was. Who knew what rugged was? This is all brand spanking new. And we weren't big then. We're getting very well known, but we weren't big. Perna was still a clear market leader in year 2. Now, it was changing really fast, but they're a clear market leader in year 2. By the way, we started showing up on TV shows because of this product as well. ER. You guys watch ER? You heard of the show ER?
You can imagine it.
It was the #1 TV show in America at the time. George Clooney was on it. You know who George Clooney is? God.
See how old I'm feeling?
No, you wanna know what's really bad, is when your daughter comes to you and says, 1965, that was a long time ago, it was like 75 years ago. I was born in 1965, folks. To put this in perspective. Yeah, she actually said that. Very recently. So, yeah, George Clooney, TV show ER, Warner Brothers calls up and says, hey, we'd like to use your.
Do you remember the very first book, of the Spencer the Glock book? And do you remember the comment in there about how distinctive it was, and every episode of Law and Order showed a policeman with a Glock on his or her hip?
Yeah.
And that was free advertising.
And Bruce Willis getting denied at the airport, right, or finding a plastic unidentifiable gun,
Right.
which is not true.
Anyway, so this starts showing up on this hit TV, #1 show in America, Warner Brothers. But before it actually got there, I thought it was a rep calling me up, because I'm not, what would you say? Somebody calls you up on the phone and says, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm Duncan from Warner Brothers, and we'd like to use your stretcher on our, hit TV show, ER. What's the #1 show in America right now? Anybody know? Somebody calls you up and says, hey, we need your product on Warner Brothers Studios tomorrow, can you get it here? And I'm like, yeah, what's up, Doc? I thought it was a rep, and I started joking around. I'm like, sure, only if I can be on as an extra. They say, okay. And before I realize it, I understand that I'm actually talking to Warner Brothers, and I'm flying out there right after New Year's. One of my reps hears about this, and she is like a big George Clooney lover. And says, I have to go with you. I can't take you with me. She goes, I'll fly my own way. You gotta take me, I'll do the in-servicing. I'm like, sure. You wanna come out on your vacation and go in-service George Clooney? Let's go. And when she in-serviced George Clooney, I didn't stick around to be an extra. She's actually on a Valentine's Day episode, pregnant. She did not end up dating George Clooney. It did not end well for her. It did work. But this product is now on TV every week. And it just took off. It just took off. Inferno's still making. They made non-powder coated stretchers for the next 20 years. They just
Did it do anything differently in response?
Ultimately, yes, but they really did not. We thought they would lower their price. It didn't. They went at it and said, no, thing's too heavy, it's too clunky, you don't want it. And we said, yeah, we're heavier, we're stronger, we're rugged. If you want a flimsy transport stretcher, go with Inferno. We repositioned the whole industry. It wasn't overnight. About 5 years later, I moved to Canada, we were about 30 million in revenue. But now at this point, we had taken a significant chunk out of their market share. But we're still only on one or two products, only 2 products at the time. Inferno had an SKU list of probably about 700 or 800.
How long did it take Inferno to actually make a different product or have some kind of like actual reaction?
So after, we made some minor modifications after about 4 or 5 years. They didn't start powder coating until like 2010, 2011. Yeah, I mean, this is, and mind you, it's a family-run business. So one of the reasons we attacked, one of the reasons I chose them as a competitor, Dad, Elroy Borgraf, was the founder of the company, built this wonderful company. 1940 to 1980. His sons took over in the late 80s. His sons were knobs. They were rich kids that really didn't have a good understanding of the market, didn't really spend a lot of time in it, but were milking it. And they had a big product line, guys. They had a lot of distributors out there that were the dominant play in the space. And it wasn't one product, okay? This is their main product, well, the previous one was their main product. But that was still, you know, their stretcher market was maybe 30% of their overall product portfolio. They had rescue equipment, and they had stretcher backboards, and they had all sorts of devices in their portfolio, airway management stuff as well. So it wasn't a one-trick pony, and they were still growing. Not necessarily in this product, but some of it was a little bit of death by nicks, and they didn't realize how bad they were getting hurt right away. Yeah, the sales started dropping here, but overall, they're still growing 3 or 4% a year. That slowly started shrinking. But, you know, it wasn't like the sky, you know, fell on them and then they fell apart. They plateaued at about $100 million in 2004, 2005. They're about $120 million in revenue now. So even now, it's not like they fell apart. They have other lines that Stryker's still not into, but Stryker's doing $1.4 billion in the sector. They're not even in the same realm anymore.
Sounds like they got cocky. They had a lot of market share, and but ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Ain't broke, don't fix it, and it's still a cash cow, and you get a lot of money out of it. They're still making profitability on it.
I mean, it's a very viable strategy to milk your cash cow. And fund other lines.
Look, those guys ain't poor. They didn't run it into the ground into zero. You know, there's also a risk to going aggressive. I mean, they could have doubled, tripled their R&D department and gone after us, and maybe even killed us early on. They chose not to. But that would also have been an investment on their part, which would have changed their lifestyles as well. Or they could have sold the company, or they could have bought us. They couldn't have bought the company, they couldn't have bought Stryker, but they could have bought Vision.
I was talking to a partner who, I guess it was a hedge fund. And what they would do is they'd find old stale technology companies that were, you know, clearly past their prime, but still had a market. And that was their niche in investments. And so they had a portfolio of old products, old tech products. An example was, you remember the big octopus thing that sat on a conference table for conference calls? It's actually a dog compared to Zoom, compared to everything else. But they're running that company. And they're still selling it, they're still servicing it, it's still a brand name. They're not gonna grow it. I mean, they're gonna harvest the very end of the cash flows. It's all predictable. They can leverage it on debt. I mean, it's a strategy that you just don't expect to see in the tech sector. And yet once you realize it's there, it's like, yeah, obvious, you know?
Right. I got a company right now, one of my client companies, Clear Captions. They provide captioning for the hard of hearing. It's an FCC mandate, the FCC funds it. So if your grandparents, parents can't hear very well, they're eligible for these phones for free. And it's a landline-based technology. They have some voice over IP in it as well. But essentially, it's real-time captioning on a land phone. And it has higher accuracy and better latency, quicker response than your iPhone would. And if you have captioning on your TV for a live event, you realize how crappy it actually still is. You know, listen to Monday Night Football anytime you want, put it on captioning, and you'll realize it's
horrible.
2 or 3 plays earlier, and you know, Troy Aikman's discussions are like, he didn't say that. Like, yeah. But this is highly accurate stuff. But you can very easily imagine this is not going to be a tech that's going to be around in 10 years. But it's highly profitable. big margins, big EBITDA, 35-40% EBITDA. And it's hard, it's actually slightly growing as a market, even though you wouldn't think it should be, even though the rates keep coming down. But how long is that product gonna be on the market?
Longer than you think.
You know, yeah, I say this because in telecom, the landline should have been dead 20 years ago. None of you have landlines, right? You have one? You have, all right. You're the exception to the rule. Did you have it originally, or was it came with a bundle? Couldn't get rid of it?
It was always part of the house.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So usually it's your parents or grandparents that may still have a landline. Any of your grandparents still have a rotary phone? Have you seen a rotary phone?
Like that.
Like my parents had a rotary phone until a couple of years ago. The kids used to love to actually use it. It's novel. They had a cord that ran all over the house as well. Landlines should have been dead 20 years ago. You know, they probably have another 15 years worth of life in them because of the senior market. You can't take it away from them. And not putting any more new ones in, but it hasn't gone away either. All right, let me get on to the rest of the presentation of those. We'll never get to the case. I'm gonna give you the 12 tenets of product management and med tech. And these are across pharmaceutical, health IT, medical device, I mean, you name it, they're pretty much universal. First thing, you got to deep dive into the clinical, operational, and financial needs that you're trying to make better. So whatever product or tech you're bringing forward, it's got to address clinical needs. How do I make this better for the patient? Is it a better outcome? Is it safer? Is it clinically more effective? I need to actually prove this out no matter what product or device I'm developing. I need to create operational efficiencies for the user, for the nurse, for the doc, for the EMT, for the paramedic, for the PA, for the PT, for the OT, whoever it is I'm selling to and is using my product, I need to make them operationally more efficient. Shorter amount of time, more efficient use of their time. And then finally, I gotta figure out a way to make this financially justifiable. I gotta take cost out, not just of the product, it may be a more expensive product, but I gotta take cost out of the system of healthcare that they're providing. And I need to be able to prove this. And the only way to do all of this is to do a deep dive. So whatever it is, you need to live that life. Live the life of the RN, live the life of the paramedic. For EMTs, we went on ride-alongs, a lot of ride-alongs at nights, weekends, days, transports, emergencies. The stories that we have will curdle your toes. So we had, I was there one time when they literally duct taped an old woman down to the stretcher because every time they try to put and she was hard of hearing. She had a heart event in the shower, so she's half undressed. And they're trying to put heart leads to monitor her. And every time they try to put a heart lead on her chest, she's like punching them, like literally, boom. So they ended up duct taping her to the stretcher. Because the third time she punched, they're like, that's it. And I'm horrified. And I'm sitting there with these folks just like I'm horrified. But there's like constant stories of these. We went into some really bad areas in domestic abuse cases to treat knife wounds. Meanwhile, the woman who stabbed her husband is still in the other room and she's still pissed off. And we're in there trying to treat him. She's yelling at us not to treat him. And we had to actually leave and wait for the police to arrive before we could come back in and treat her husband. Oh, he was fine, but he was.
He just got stabbed.
It wasn't a life, like even I knew it wasn't life-threatening wound at the time. But it was, yeah, he was stabbed. Had a pretty big gash in his shoulder, and she's just yelling, screaming at us and him, and I'm like, and like we're starting to treat him, and then the lead paramedic's like, yeah, we're gonna go outside for a few minutes. And we all hustled back out, left him alone in there with her because we were so cowardly, and waited for the police to arrive. And she's a good sized woman. I don't want to think she's like this little lady that chased us out. But deep dives are absolutely important, whether it's in surgery, you need to watch a lot of surgeries, whether it's with a physical therapist, you need to watch a lot of physical therapy. These are the things that really, especially in product management, you have to understand it in a deep and intimate way. Competitive technologies, understanding what your comp is doing is also key. You can start with going to a lot of trade shows, but again, the deep dives you do on the field, you need to watch what the competitors are using, what the competitors are doing, what their key pitch is. Not only what their key pitch is on the web, which will give you some hint, but I can't tell you how many competitors have no idea what their main value benefit is to the customer. They'll be pitching one thing on the web, and then the customer is using it for some completely different reason. So you kind of have to know this. You also have to know what their strategies are. You can't attack them straight on. For Fernal, for example, they were using distributors. They sold it, at the time, they sold exclusively through distributors. All right, now, one response is, we'll undercut you at the distributor level, and we'll buy into the distributors with a better product. We chose not to do that, and that was absolutely the right decision. We went direct. They used distributors, we went direct. If they went direct, we would use distributors. Point being is, you gotta do something a little different than what the competitor is doing. You try to attack them head on their strength, you're gonna lose, especially a big boy. If they were doing TV commercials, we would have gone radio. If they were doing radio commercials and TV, we would have gone direct mail. Whatever they were doing, we would have done something completely different. And that, you gotta think through these things. They did very little advertising. We went pure direct sales, and we went a lot of journal and trade show campaigns, a lot. My first year, I actually went to 30 regional trade shows, hawking EMS product. And again, that gives a real intimate knowledge of the customer, but also a completely different strategy on attacking the company. Market size. All right, this is the obvious one. But you need to look at growth factors, and you need to look at how you could grow the market differently. The markets change really fast. Ozempic is killing some medical device companies right now. You all know what Ozempic is? Mm-hmm. It's found on obesity, it's diabetic treatment. Mm-hmm. Well, think of all the unintended beneficial side effects that would cut into the medical industry. So Ozempic, great drug.
Liposuction.
A lot of plastic surgeons losing a lot of business right now.
Yeah.
A lot of gyms losing a lot of business right now. a lot of hip and knee implant
Ah.
companies losing a lot of business right now. All because of that goddamn drug, Ozempic, just killing off the industry. And you gotta watch for things like this. Ozempic is a category killer, just changed the game. I don't know if it's gonna last forever, but right now it's shifted a lot of things. And it's certainly cut back on different types of device usage. Oh, sorry. Rest of the world is key here as well. Don't forget about the rest of the world. The rest of the world is not the US. It's this general, hey, Europe is the same size as the US market. Kinda. Europe is one unified EU market. Yeah, not really. Especially in healthcare. They all have their own healthcare systems. They all buy very differently. They buy on the formularies. You gotta get on the formulary. If you're not on the formulary, you can't sell in that market. If you're on the formulary, you're not local, so you can't sell in that market. And we're gonna start talking about that next as well.
Demographics and trials. Even within Europe, I don't think northern countries accept some in European trials.
So you gotta do the clinical trials in both countries. You do it in France, Germany, England, Benelux, great. You do it in Italy and Spain, not always well accepted. And they all hate each other. I mean, I'm not even gonna hide it. This whole EU unity thing is a bunch of BS. And, it is what it is. They play nice, good, and stand by some things, but there's a lot of nationalism that still takes place. Even now, even the EMS stretcher business I talked about, there's still local players in some of these markets. And Stryker and Fernald never made it in. Because they're not local. They sell some there. But the incumbent national provider is still a national provider. And then Asia is a totally different market. Determine the target, who is it? The physician actually making the purchase? Sometimes. Physicians have a lot of power. And if they own their own clinics, they're absolutely making it. But the physician may only be the recommender in a hospital. Like, I want that implant. Yeah, well, you're not getting the Stryker implant, you're getting the Smith and Nephew implant. We have a contract with Smith and Nephew, so luck. I don't want it or I'm leaving. Well, you make us a lot of money, let's talk about it. But unless you're one of those docs, the high-powered orthopedic docs that's making a lot of money for the hospital or cardiovascular surgeon, the rest of the hospital ain't give a crap about. You're a physician, you go in there, you're an OB, and you say, hey, I want this product for birthing. They're gonna say, yeah, that's nice. Look, I'm leaving. Yeah, this is the door. So you gotta know who the power is and who's making the decisions. And then you gotta watch these guys unfold. We talked about this at length. Regulatory reimbursement strategy is absolutely key. And before we get into that, you need to understand whether the system you're selling to is fee for service or value-based pricing. It's a kind of key nomenclatures in healthcare. Fee for service, pretty obvious. Reimbursement comes on a per service event. So I provide a CT of your chest, and the insurance company pays me $300 in reimbursement. I provide an MRI of your knee, the insurance company reimburses me at $290 for my MRI. But there's also value-based purchasing. Anybody got an idea what that is?
I think we got it, but not like during the MRI thing, right? Like I think it was just more on, trying to like figure out, what kind of impact, your service has on, the provider. So like, when you're a buyer of the product, and then you're charging them like a total like amount based on that, so like they can ultimately recoup benefit, by using your product, but like at the same time, like you're getting a good value out of selling it.
No, I mean, those are good points, but no, so fee for service, you're paid for the procedure. Value-based service, you're paid for the diagnosis. Okay. So you're a hospital. Aaron comes in, he's got pneumonia. There's a diagnostic code for pneumonia. As a hospital, my insurance company is going to pay me $18,000 to treat Aaron's pneumonia. Whether it costs me $12,000 or $20,000, I'm going to get $18,000 to treat Aaron's pneumonia. Okay. It's a little bit of population health. It's a specific, like, they know that on average, it's only going to cost me $13,000 or $14,000 to treat Aaron's pneumonia. I'm also responsible, by the way, if he gets it again and comes back in within a 30-day period, because my insurance company says I have to have a warranty on Aaron. So not only do I have to treat him and get him out, I have to make sure he doesn't come back in. If he comes back in after 60 days, well, that's another event, another diagnosis, and I can start all over again. But the insurance company is going to pay me $18,000 to treat Aaron's pneumonia, and no more, no less. You know, I could, if I only have one of him, I could have lost my shirt on Aaron. But if I have 30 or 50 pneumonia patients coming in, the hospital has more than that on a monthly or quarterly basis, depending on the size of my hospital. I know it's going to cost me, on average, $13,000 or $14,000 to treat them. So when you're a company and you know that, and you've got a product that may be part of that continuum of care of treating pneumonia, you have to show shrinkage of the overall cost of treating pneumonia, not just your device. So if your intubation tube helps Aaron get better quicker, or your antibiotic helps Aaron get better quicker, it may be beneficial to pay more for that to get him out a day or two sooner. Does that make sense? So there are two systems that insurances pay on. They pay fee for service, which is based on a procedure. Surgery costs $25,000. I'm going to pay you $25,000 for that surgery. Or they're going to say you have a knee replacement, and I'm going to pay $37,000 for the knee replacement, including the stay and the treatment and infection rates, et cetera. And you can basically charge whatever the heck you want, or buy whatever you want, but I'm only going to pay you this much money. So, fee for service, value-based purchasing, two different structures. You got to know where your product or your tech fits with all of this, because you got to build out your financial models for it as well. Regulatory path. Oh, good God. The forgotten element in healthcare. It'll cost you a lot of money. We gotta have a regulatory team. You need to know your clinical pathway, your regulatory pathway to success. There's all sorts of 510Ks or PMAs or lots of different acronyms out there, different licenses that you'll need. You'll need to get with the FDA and a clinical research organization early on to help map out this pathway. You want to have discussions with them early on. By the way, just because you have a discussion with them and they say, this is the right way to go, doesn't mean they're not going to change their mind in 6 months. They do. And guess what? They win. You can fight them. Go with whatever they tell you. Suck it up. Realize they're going to screw you at least 3 times during the process. And it is what it is. I told you about this product. We failed to launch because we didn't allocate enough money for the clinical testing. It was brutal. But like I said, they're in the market with keeping, you know, brain dead organ donors alive, or harvestable, I guess. You know, it got to where it ultimately it provided some real good. All right, IP. IP is something you also got to set money aside for. You want the right patents. Building a big patent portfolio is important, but you can also spend a lot of money on some bad patents. It's a defendable position because it sometimes will confuse your competitors, especially if you have a lot of them pending. But ultimately, you can also waste a lot of money down the street as well.
We have not talked about IP in this class, in this course, but we will in the spring if you stick with it.
By the way, IP is not strictly patents. So you've got US and international patents. Trade secrets are, I gotta tell you, an underappreciated, underlooked value. So trade secrets like Coke's secret formula, everybody knows what the ingredients are, nobody knows the ratios or how it's cooked. These are sometimes more valuable than the patents. So don't underestimate trade secrets at all on this. You know, in the case, we actually, it probably could have, should have used trade secrets a whole lot better than they did. It would have been hard to keep those people from competing, but you could have pushed them out of your space a little bit, and they didn't. Like Duggan could have done some different things to better protect his trade secrets that ultimately ended up starting up another company with a lot of worth as well, and ultimately maybe the winner in the market. I'm going to skip over this because we know we're getting a little behind. Analyze reimbursement. You need to know what the reimbursement is, and you need to know whether insurance companies are actually paying out on it. Just because there's a code that says the dollar amount for reimbursement is $1,800 doesn't mean the insurance companies are actually paying out on that code. Because there's a miscellaneous code that everybody tells you, oh, just file it under a miscellaneous code, they'll approve it. They'll approve a couple. So when you sell to a doc and you say, hey, this cup's gonna get you $300 every time you use it on one of your patients, and they put a miscellaneous code and they get paid on the first 3, and the 4th one's denied, the 5th one's denied, the 6th one's denied, they're still paying for the cup. You get really pissed. They stop buying your cup. So you really need to understand and you need to hire a specialist for this because you need to understand how this is all playing out. And again, remember, fee per procedure, value-based purchasing, 2 different selling methods, but you need to understand the reimbursement pathways for you. This was a miss. Now, I made a lot of money on this, but this was a miss. This is a wheelchair, marble wheelchair. Very lightweight, very high-end manual chair for paraplegics and some quads. By the way, there's a stigma. If you're a para or quad, you don't want to use a power chair. So let me start there. You're in really bad shape if you have to use a power chair, and paras and quads hate using power chairs. So they all want manual chairs, and this was a better mousetrap. Shock absorbers, it was very lightweight, came apart very easily to get in and out of the car. The levers to use to actually take it apart were specifically designed so you didn't have to have great hand control to actually do it, which is another key benefit. Was awesome. Totally better than anything on the market. Reimbursement was, I think, $1,800, $1,848. We were selling for $3,900. So we had better mousetrap. We badly misunderstood that private pay is a very small percentage of the market. Even people that had money would take the free $1,800 product over the out-of-pocket $3,900 product. Okay, because this product was essentially free to them. This product was uncovered and cost them $3,900. So it's not a $2,100 difference, it's actually a $3,900 difference in what they're buying. You see this playing out in hearing aids all the time right now. Hearing aids are covered typically up to about $1,000 depending on the state on Medicare or Medicaid, and they're free. The really good ones cost $4,000 or $5,000. They're freaking awesome. I've tried some of the personal sound amplifying products, which are very similar. You can tune into conversations in the next room. Try some of the stuff from Bose sometimes. Some of the tech that's coming out on the hearing side, you can actually tone out all the background noise. You can tune into specific conversations. If you're in an airplane, one of my buddies, Bob Ray, actually uses these things. And these aren't even hearing aids. And he can actually tune in to any conversation he wants in the plane. He doesn't. Not that I know of, but he can. Okay? So be careful what you say in the planes running up. But we missed badly. So we were just looking at a private pay market, and it was a very small percentage. The company actually blew up for different reasons. I picked up the company out of distress, milked it till its utter demise. Basically pulled up all the assets, all the inventory, and we started selling that off. Made a lot of money on inventory that we bought for literally pennies. But it was, it never would have gone very far because our price was so strong. This is the GPOs. These are licenses to hunt. Group purchasing organizations rule the healthcare industry. You have to be on a group purchasing organization. There's 4 or 5 of them: Premier, HPG, Vizient, which is a local Dallas company that essentially create congressional mandated entities that negotiate pricing down. They're actually would be considered oligopolies otherwise, but it's a congressionally mandated decision that GPOs can actually do this. And they will negotiate your prices down. They do this to make rural hospitals have access to the same pricing that urban hospitals do. Problem is, if you're not on them as a small company in a startup, you're kind of screwed because you're locked out of 80% of the hospitals in the US market. And you can get on, but it's really tough. They're like, oh, you're not on a contract? Well, come back when you are. Well, your doc wants that. I'm like, yeah, we don't buy off contract. We can only buy 7% off contract a year. You know, you're not. Yeah, so you gotta keep that in mind. You gotta get that through. ACOs, IHNs, IDNs are kind of mini GPOs. These are local, regional conglomerates that come together. THRs, Baylor Scott and White's, are large local IDNs. The federal supply schedule will take you 2 to 3 years to get on. So you can sell to VAs, DOD. And by the way, that's about 7% of the healthcare market in the US. So if you want to play in that market, you got to take 2 to 3 years to get on contract. Like, these are all the things you have to think about to start penetrating. And then you got to get on the right formularies, and then you also have these monster vendors out there if you're selling disposables. If you're not on these contracts, or you're not on the PBMs, the pharmaceutical benefit managers, you are screwed. You can only sell a small portion of the total market. Because the PBMs, pharmaceutical benefit managers, essentially own 90% of the pharmacy market. So you have to sell through them. Or you sell direct. Selling direct in pharmacy is rough. I'm rushing a little bit, but that was a license to hunt. This one's obvious, but hard. The old elevator speech. Put it in layman's terms, non-experts terms. You basically have to be able to espouse the benefits of your product in 2 sentences tops. If you can't, go back. Rethink it. Why are you different? Why are you better? Always bring it back to clinical, operational, financial benefits. Pick the best one, stick with it. You don't have to be everything to everyone, but pick that one thing that you're better at and drive it home. With our ambulance stretcher, we were better in a lot of ways. Ultimately, we said we're just stronger, we're rugged, and we stuck with that. But we had folks that came up to us and said, well, you know, why should I buy yours? And I'm like, well, are you transporting patients or are you dealing with emergency situations? They're like, well, we do both. Well, doing transports, go buy their product. They're like, no, we do only ED. Like, okay, well, this is the product for you because this was designed specifically for high intensity use. We just left it at that. I didn't sell them a damn thing on the knobby tires or the fact that it was reflective at night or that their shirts stayed clean or didn't drop on them. I'm like, look, it's just, this is what it was designed for. It helps when your product actually looks the part too. So you want to make something that has an obvious benefit. You're gonna say your car is super fast, but it'll look like it's a super fast car. Bentleys are super fast. It's hard to tell anybody that a Bentley actually is super fast. Plan for financial needs, and whatever you think you plan for, double it. And then you're probably still a little short. This is why I also think we were better off staying within Stryker, because ultimately I think we would have had massive struggles. And any hiccups, which were easily absorbed by Stryker, would have been, oh my God, I gotta take a third mortgage out of the house. But we could have been in the Scott Giambalvo's building.
Oh, you would have given it to Michigan.
I'll take care of mom and daughter. Executive team is key. And you can't, so one of the things that came out in the book was you can't be completely wedded to the same people throughout the process. Hamdi was a great early on CMO / CEO. As the company progressed, quite frankly, I mean, it was pretty obvious he was a terrible CEO. Maybe in early startup days, he was a good CEO, but he was a terrible CEO. And, you know, you got to do something. You got to basically make those tough decisions. Rothbaum did make those tough decisions, but it wasn't just Rothbaum. Duggan also made those tough decisions. There's a reason Hamdi was fired twice as a CEO. He was not good at it. And you actually, I'm like, oh my God, that's terrible. Like, that's terrible. And then he got fired. I'm like, no, that makes sense. Like, why wasn't it sooner? But you know, you have to have the right people in the right places at the right times. And people, the companies sometimes outgrow people. There's a general rule of thumb, you know, 0 to 50, a certain type of CEO, 50 to 100 million, you need a different type, 100 to $1 billion, you need a third type. When you get $1 billion plus, it's a completely different animal. And you've got to think along these ways. And it's not just the CEO, it's also the team underneath. We saw some of this in how AstraZeneca purchased this little startup and tried to run it in the AstraZeneca way. my stomach's just retching thinking about how that all worked. I worked for Stryker for 16 years. I started the vision from scratch, making every decision along the way. Built sales teams, built the engineering team, built the production team. Fast forward 15 years later, I'm running Stryker Canada. I've got a $180 million vision under my belt. And I'm spending 6 months to change a bolt on a stretcher. And I'm the guy that makes the decision, and I can't get this decision made for a single bolt. We wanted to change to stainless steel bolt. And that's not a joke, that's a real story. But the company at the time, when I started, 180 million, 320 million or so when we started EMS. And then all of a sudden, fast forward 15 years, and I'm running a $180 million division, and I can't change a freaking bolt on a stretcher. Whereas 15 years prior, I'm making decisions probably what a 26-year-old should be allowed to make, and I'm doing it over lunch. Yeah, we need to do this, and we did it. But that's also the difference between a small startup with a $320 million company and a $180 million division, and probably was then maybe $5 or $6 billion. But I also know I ran my course in Stryker at that point. I knew it was time for me. Executive team, you got to get the right people at the right time. And then always be thinking about exits. What do you want to do? What does your investor team want to do? You better be lined up. It's a big fight. Your investor team wants to get out at 5 million, 50 million, 500 million. You better know, what do they have the stomach for? There's little inflection points along the way. And you can grow to a certain level with certain financing and certain executive teams. You can't go beyond it. You got to blow it out continuously. What do you have a stomach for? What does your investor team have a stomach for? So they better be in line. And they're not always. And they may be in line today, but in 3 years, they start falling out. So these are the things you have to think through in product dev. And it sounds like I just made this really hard. But these are not overnight processes either. And maybe with some questions, otherwise we'll start the case. Because I know I ran way over.
No, I don't think so, that's great. Any other questions? Well, let's thank Scott for, let's take about a 10-minute break. And then let's come back and we'll talk about the case.
So I asked you at the beginning, would you still do the same thing? What would you have done if you were me? Would you be a billionaire? Or would you be teaching in the Jerry Junkins building?
What would you do? Yeah, let's take 10 minutes and we'll come back and talk. Yeah, we're gonna, the board structure and power of that is something that we will actually get into in the spring. And I have a great case on that that's actually Dodge versus Ford.
Oh.
And it's so nice to go back that far in history and to look at sort of the battle for corporate control. Because it's nobody can get upset about it. It's just, this book actually there's a line in there that I want to pull out on exactly that.
Are the boards?
Yeah, when was it Rothbard, when he leaves, when he sells early, all of a sudden it's a clean playing field.
Oh, God, yeah, pretty good, yeah.
So that's a little thread that I want to pull out here.
Yeah.
But that was awesome.
So I was like, oh, I could have been a billionaire.
I think, and it had to be Stryker at that instant of time, not earlier or later.
Right.
It was just that was.
Right.
I do love that story. I really do. There's so many lessons in there.
Oh, gosh, yeah. And it does keep me up at night.
And I picked you in that lecture for this class because it is basically fundamentally a product management, at a larger company with, as opposed, it's very entrepreneurial, so it also fits into the entrepreneurship course, but I liked it better in this course than the next one.
So anybody a product manager in this room?
No, aspiring.
Aspiring? All engineers? Everybody here an engineer?